Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software. I'm pleased to present Dion McCormick, no relation, our Supreme Solutions Engineer and founder of Giant Killer Training. Also joining us is Sarah Mitchell, in charge of our documentation department. Today, Dion will be going over a couple of questions that people had asked ahead of time by sending their emails to guides@alphasoftware.com and doing a quick presentation of some solutions. But we're also here to answer your questions. So you can go ahead and type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, how are you doing there today?
Awesome. We gotta make you the presenter. And you said you have a brand new machine you're using today, is that right?
Yes,
Newish, new to you? Oh,
indeed. We're still getting there. We're still
Ooh,
getting
nice
there.
scenery. Is that, that's from
Yeah,
your recent
so
vacation, I think, right? Just
yeah, I wish. Future vacations there.
future
Well,
vacation.
hey, thank you everybody for joining us. This is Dion McCormick, and appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join with us. Today, we're going to focus on, most importantly, the ability or for questions that came in from our audience. We really try and encourage that. Actually, you can send requests to guides@alphasoftware.com. That's GUIDES at alphasoftware.com. And we have two topics to cover, which I'll do in a few minutes. And again, one's a follow-up from our discussion last week. And the next one is actually a new question that was actually pretty cool stuff that we'll go through in a little bit more detail. So we'll get to that in a few minutes. In the meantime, if you have any questions, that's why we're here. So you can obviously submit them ahead of time to guides@alphasoftware.com, but also you can go into the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel, put your information in there, and the team will be looking over it, and we'll try and pick and get those answered as much as possible today. And if we can't, we'll put them on the list for answering in the very near future. But before we get fully started, again, go ahead and take the time now to go into your questions area and enter that in. I wanted to go in and let you know that we're almost there. I mean, we are almost to the end of September. Crazy, crazy time. So we're looking at literally a little over a month or so before we're at Alpha DevCon 2020. And this is going to be an amazing 3-day event. It's going to have online not only our team here, but more importantly, our developers, and we'll be demonstrating new capabilities, new features, talking about roadmaps. We'll also be doing more hands-on training. It's really going to be an amazing event. So where you can go is to alphasoftware.com, DevCon 2020, and I'm going to go ahead and put that into the chat window real quick. There we go. And you can register now if you haven't registered. If you have, we appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you there. If you haven't, jump on and get in there, and we can do that or we'll get you registered, and that's going to be phenomenal. And you know, what's amazing is Dave was way ahead of the curve as doing virtual versus in person. Otherwise, we would have been scrambling pretty heavily at this point in time to get things adjusted. So good job, Dave and the marketing team. We got a lot of really fun stuff coming for that. So that's Alpha DevCon 2020. Get signed up, and we're going to see you there really soon. So as I mentioned, we had two questions. One is a follow-on question to our presentation last week, which involved grids with checkboxes. So I'm going to do a real quick refresh how I put together the checkboxes aspect. Then I'm going to show you some really cool things you can do with it from the standpoint of using it to drive reporting capabilities. The other question came in regards to, on a UX control, how you can show and hide and interact with controls, and what are the different methods to do so. So we're going to kind of cover some of the different methods, the pros and cons, how you would apply them there. There's an enormous amount of flexibility in there, and we'll go through that through our presentation there. And as always, put in those questions, and we'll be trying to get to those as many as possible. So what I'd like to focus on first is go in, and we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit and build out a sort of a grid report builder. So the idea is we're going to have a grid, and it's going to have a report that's associated with it. But the important thing is we want to limit what's in the report based upon what we select in the grid. So we're going to do a little bit of sort of call it a recap of last week through showing this, but then showing you the nicer, newer capability there. So I'm going to build a grid really quickly. I'm going to use the built-in, and I'll go to my connection strings, the AA demo Northwind, which is built in, so it's easy to sum. Again, if you want this, go ahead, send it to us, and we'll be putting it up on our GitHub site to allow you to download what we build today. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new grid. And I'm just going to move through it quickly. I'm not going to use a template or anything along those lines. And I'm going to go here. And we'll go into the query. I'm going to select my Northwinds database. And we'll just select the customers table. And now we're not going to do any filtering or order by. We want to see everything in that table. So we're going to leave elements there. Now, that said, you could have defined arguments, filtering, etc. to add to that. It's really up to you now. Now I'm going to go to fields. I'm just going to add in a few sample fields. Save this, and we're going to call this a checkbox filter report underscore grid. And I like to put in the type of it, so if you see it on the file system, you'll know whether it's a UX or a grid, just personal preference there. So nothing super exciting at this point. We just have a grid. I think it's going to be in mobile presentation, so we might want to, nope, it's actually in there. So nice grid, all the functionality is. But now what I want to do is add a checkbox control so I can check multiple items, sort of essentially filter it. So I'm going to go back to design. I'm going to go to my properties here, and I'm going to use our handy dandy search properties up here to look for checkbox. So I see it has checkbox select column. And there you go, enable that, and that's all you need to do. So now when I go in here, it's going to add in that checkbox and do that all automatically for me. I can use like select all. As you can see, I really didn't have to do any programming. I just kind of added that capability in here. So there's two things we need to do. One is, the bottom line is the end goal of this exercise is to have a report that's based on this and filter that report based on the checkbox items that are selected. But it's a two-step process, and I'll kind of explain that in a few moments. So first, let's go ahead, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to create a new report. So I'm going to jump over here to my Web Projects control panel. I'm going to go to my report section, and I'm going to create a new report. And this is going to be the destination, sort of what I want outputted from the system. So I'm going to use a SQL data source. By the way, actually, let me go through that a little slower. Go new report. I'm going to use a quick report. I could have used a free form or a table layout, or a layout table is up to you, but I'm going to use quick report to make this quick and easy. So I'm going to select my connection string. Next, I'm going to select my customers. And again, I only want a subset of the actual fields in there at this time. Now you'll notice I'm not going to add any filtering. Now, potentially you can define arguments, pass in arguments, etc. But for this particular scenario, I just want to have a report that pulls back all the data in that table. And I'm going to click finish. So now I've got my new quick report. I've got my fields. I'm going to just add those in. We'll do a quick preview. You know, nothing super fancy, just kind of there. We can add a little stylus, make it look a little nicer. So now we kind of have a little, it's got a little header and other things there. We can also do things like grouping. Let's say we want to group it by company name. So the quick report's nice because you can build these really fast reports, and then what's neat is you could actually move this over into either a table out or other report and make your modifications there. So I'm going to go ahead and save this report here. We're going to call this checkbox filtered report. And I've now saved it. But again, right now, whenever I run this report, it's going to basically show all records. I haven't set up any built-in filtering, any arguments, any other things like that. I basically said, just link this report to that table. And that's kind of the nice thing here is once I have my report, I don't have to do a lot of fancy gyrations. It's just going to work. Okay, so let's go back to our checkbox filter report. So in order to run that report, what I want to do is have a subset of items shown, and then based on those subset of items, run the report from there. So I have one key step, and it's going to require one piece of code in here. And that's what I want to do is add a button to this grid. What that button will look and see if there's any checked items, and then filter the grid based on those checked items. So I'm going to add a button into my grid using what's called an action button and use that to filter the grid. So to do so, we go into design, we go to properties here, and I'm going to search up here again on action buttons. So we have something called action buttons. And I find that property, and you have that property right here. So action buttons allow you to add, it's different from the UX, they have a full button builder, etc. But for now, we're just going to create an action button. So I'm going to double click on here. You can see I don't have any action buttons yet. So I'm going to add an action button, and I'm going to call that filter. I'm just going to put the word filter. So this is the name of the action, and here's what's actually going to show. And I can do I can add an image, I can make it a button, I can make a hyperlink. There's some flexibility around how it's displayed on the screen for the user. But I'm going to leave it simple, use my button, and go from there. So now that I have that, I have a whole bunch of other things. I can change its style. I can change like when that button is shown or not. Maybe you don't want certain people to be able to see that, etc. So here I'm going to go to the button action JavaScript. This is where I define what I want to have happen when the person clicks on this button. So I'm going to go ahead and click here to open up my JavaScript. Now, what's nice, I've got the full action JavaScript builder, meaning when they click that button, I could do any number of cool things. I could do XBasic callbacks. We showed that last week. We could open up another component. We could do mapping. We could do a whole lot of neat things. But in our case, we're going to use a nice built-in feature that when I click that button, it's going to analyze what rows are checked and then filter the grid based on those. So to do so, there's not really a built-in action JavaScript, but if I go ahead and click here to text mode, I can write a little piece of JavaScript to do that same thing. It's a built-in command. Now, I could go ahead and go somewhere and look for it and do all that, do some coding, or I can use the simple method. So you'll notice down below here, this is my basically JavaScript. I mean, I can literally put in JavaScript, and when this button is clicked, this will run. So now you'll notice down here in the left-hand corner, we have something called insert placeholder, insert grid method. I'd like you to focus on insert grid method. So I'm going to click that. In here, I want to type the word filter. So as you can see, there are all the cool built-in grid object features, resetting rows. So the neat thing about Alpha is that we really try and encapsulate so that you do like 95% of your stuff at the top level. In fact, you can do 100% of it. But we give you access to all these low-level commands. So if you want to do something a little more special, you have at it. We're not going to stop you. We're basically going to give you all the tools to be able to do something interesting. So here I'm going to type the word filter, and this filters my list of potential commands. And you can see there's a bunch of different ones, grid filter, but here there's one called filter checked rows. And this is nice because it tells you what the item does. This is the command. It gives you a description of it. And you'll notice also it actually gives you a sample. Now this is a fairly simple sample, but you can do something even more fancy. Some of the more expensive have a lot of other code that needs to be done. So this gives you all these cool examples of how to use that. So I'm just going to go here and I'm going to just say, okay, I want to use that command. I'm going to go insert. So immediately there's two benefits. One is that I don't have to go to another site. It's all built into the system. The other thing that's really nice is that it does the perfect, like capitalizes everything correctly. So I don't have to worry about accidentally creating some, typing in something and screwing up. Now you'll notice there's something in between here for flag unchecked rows. Don't need that. And the documentation shows what, why you would use that feature within there, but we don't need it. All we need is this little command that says grid object dot filter checked rows. That's all we need. So I'm going to click save. So we've created our button. We've given it a name. We've told the display button. And for our action JavaScript, we're just telling it to run this little piece of JavaScript to do that. Again, I could have used a full action JavaScript, do a bunch of things, but we're going to keep it simple. Okay, so we've defined our action button. I want to show you something real quick. So you'll notice that once this finishes rendering, it's here, but I don't see my button. No button. That's not good. I need to be able to see my button. Well, when you're working with grids, it's sort of a two-step process. Step one is to actually create the button and create how it's going to work. And then step two is to actually add it to the user interface so you can use it. So we're going to go ahead and go into design. We've got our action button, and I'm just going to scroll down a little bit farther. And you'll notice there's something called freeform edit regions. So these are the regions around the grid. So above the grid, below the grid, left and right. So you can put your items, anything you want there. And think of it as like little HTML areas that you can put around your grid. So what I want to do is actually have my button up top. So I'm going to go here to above grid. I'm going to open that up, and it basically opens up a HTML. In fact, I can insert templates and stuff. So I can type standard HTML. I can go H2, let's see, checkbox report grid /H2. And again, I can open this actually in an HTML editor right here, but I'm going to leave it there, and then I'm going to put a break. So that's going to now display whatever this HTML is in a region above the grid. But notice over here on the left, you'll see that there's a placeholder. This is showing what action buttons we've created. In fact, I can click right here and go ahead and add more buttons right here. I don't have to go back out if I wanted to do other things. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to double click it, and you'll notice that it basically just took this little piece of text and put it here. And think of that as a placeholder. When the system sees that, it's going to go, oh, you want to put a button here. I'm going to go find button filter or action button filter and place it there. So I click OK, click Save. Now, if I go into working preview, you're going to see a couple things have changed. First, you'll notice that it's put that little piece of HTML above the grid. Again, I could have put it on the right side, left side, below it, really up to me. And then you'll notice there's also now my new button here called filter. So let's go ahead and select a few items here and then select filter. Voila, boom. Now I have a small subset of rows that are available to be used. Now there's really cool things about it. The one that is most important now will show you how to now link and run that report with just this data. But notice this gives the people a lot of flexibility. Possibly you want to show a filtered group of, and then add another button that maybe iterates through these and updates the database. So last week we showed where you selected checkboxes, hit a button, it would go run that, but you may want to do the filter and then iterate through them. So there's different sort of call them user interface behavioral patterns that you can use to show it. But this is really handy because you're allowing the person to basically see this. So now notice if I go here, I want to show you the behavior. I've selected those three and I click filter. Notice I don't have any selected. If I click filter again, it basically says, oh, I'm going to show you everything. So that's kind of a built-in. Otherwise, how would you defilter the grid kind of scenario? Okay, so we've now got the ability to do the filtering. So let's go ahead now and add another button. When I click that button, what I want to do is take these selected records and open up that report we did just a few moments ago. So let me go into design, and we're going to follow a similar process. The first thing we're going to do is create an action button, and that button will run the report. And then two, we're going to then add that button to our grid so that the person can filter the report and then run the report. So first, let's go ahead and set up the action button. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to go in here. You'll see we have our existing filter button. I'm going to click add there, and I'm going to call it run report. And I can go here. Actually, let's see if it's kind of interesting. Let's go ahead and select the image and see it. I'm going to just make it a little more interesting visually. Oh, maybe print. Let's try. No, it's not really printing, but let's see. Let's just do that one. That's cool. To show you how you can use icons from there. Okay, so now we have that. So you have our icon in there for report, but now we have our run report, but we don't actually, it doesn't do anything yet. And that's where, again, we're going to return to this JavaScript and click here to open up our JavaScript builder. Now, before we went into text mode and used a built-in, here, life is simpler. I'm going to click here for action JavaScript. I'm going to click add new action, and I'm going to type the word report. And so you can see we already have pre-built actions for, in this case, open or email a report, etc. I'm going to do the open because I want to show it here. But what's cool about that is you can create a button that would take those records, create a report, and send it out to someone, which is a very common use case, very handy. So I've opened up my action JavaScript for open or email or report label or letter layout. Going to go ahead and select the report name. So I picked the one we created. So our checkbox filtered report, and remember, it doesn't have any filtering on it yet. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is then I can tell it what kind of view I want to do. So let's do HTML. That renders a little faster. I can do a whole bunch of other stuff. I can also, allow people to export it. And last but not least, I can then tell it where the target is. If I were using a panel card setup, I would probably use panels and open up the report in a different panel card, maybe one that slides out and shows. But for now, I'm just going to allow it to use a window where it pops up on the screen. Another handy one is actually if you're using PDFs, you can actually download. And so it actually skips showing the person, actually does a download. Or you can also, there's some other tricks you can do around that there. But I'm going to leave window because I want it just to pop up on the screen. So I click OK. And now I have my little JavaScript command that will, when I click run report, it's going to run that command and show me the report. Now, as I mentioned before, we've created the report button, or in this case, image, but now we need to put it on the interface because if we don't do the second step, they don't have access to the button or the action we have there. So I'm going to click above grid. You'll notice now we have our original HTML text, but check it out. I have a new action button called run report. So I'm going to put that there. And in fact, I'm just going to put in some static HTML. I'll go run report, or let's do this something a little more interesting. Click here to run report. So you can intermix HTML with these little placeholders so it shows those items there. Let's go ahead and click save, and we'll do a working preview. So you'll notice our screen will change a little bit. You'll see we have our filter button. We have click here to run report and a little icon we can click to run the report. So let's go ahead and do first. Let's filter that and let's run the report. And you're going to see something. Wait a minute here. It's nice. You notice how fast it displayed, but it's showing everything. It hasn't filtered it because I skipped purposely one step. But as you can see, if you didn't have a filtering requirement, you could just have that on there and run it off a table and be able to do things along those lines. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm going to go back into design. Now, how we do that is the following. Is we have our run report action. And we're using this open or email a report. And in here, we selected the report, how we wanted it to show, what people could do with it, and then last but not least, how we wanted to show it on the screen. But notice there's something cool in here. We have called SQL filter and SQL order. What we could do is we could actually hard code an order in here or a filter when that report gets run. But there's a cool feature built into Alpha. So I'm going to click here to open that up. And you'll see, here's our report name. I could pass in arguments, but check this out, SQL filter. And look at these two items right here. So we have something called current grid filter, current list filter. Obviously, current grid filter because we're on a grid component. We're launching from a grid component. So I'm just going to click that, and it's going to insert the word current grid filter, and be very important that the capitalization is critical, open close parentheses. So what's neat about this, and this is just built in, when this runs, it says, oh, okay, you want me to perform a SQL filter for the current grid filter? Great. I'm going to go back and look at whatever filter you have applied to that grid and pass that into the report. It's really nice, very simple. And you'll notice now I'm using kind of the filter by checking off the rows. Well, if I used a traditional grid filter where I just had an area up top where I could do a filter, it works for that also. It works for both if you have like the regular grid filter on top and also for a checkbox methodology. It just so happens the question today was about the checkbox. So that's all I did was add that little command into the SQL. So I'm going to go ahead, going to select a few things here. And if I can, going to filter it. Now run my report, and voila, you'll see that when this report run, it saw that little command and it said, oh, okay, wait a second. I'm going to go back and look at what filter was applied here. meaning that it only returned, when I called the database, it only returned these 3 rows. And I'm going to pass that information in to the report. So when the report runs, it's going to use the same filter that's applied to my grid as here. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, up here, I could have the traditional grid filter, use the same technique. Filter it off there. I don't have to check anything off, hit the button. It's going to automatically look at the current grid filter, grab it, use it for the report. So this is a really handy way to use the checkbox control to do reporting. Very, very handy. Now, last week we showed how you could call something and then do a xbasic and run something in the background. So if I wanted to take these 3 rows and wanted to update their data in the database, there's an easy way to do that from there. But at this point, that was kind of the question. The question was, hey, how would I apply the checkbox stuff to reporting? And I hope that answers the question a lot more for folks. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn around and see if we have any questions or comments from the crew.
Nope, no questions on that so far.
Dynamite. Wow. Okay. It's crystal clear or clear as mud. How it goes from there.
I think you
Never
did an
know.
excellent job.
Ah,
In fact,
cool.
someone just wrote in excellent, so they obviously are doing a good job.
Thank you. I'm begging for attention.
He lives with that praise. Yeah.
It's so pathetic. It's like, grow a backbone, Dion. Don't have to. It's like a trained seal.
Yeah.
Hey, throw me the sardines. Excellent. Okay. So that was that. Again, if you're interested in this, we're going to put it up on our GitHub repository. Send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com. We'll get it over to you. It will include 2 things. It will include the report grid and also the report itself. And you need both of those. And remember, again, super important, make sure your alpha DAO connection string has one called a demo northwind, and it will, there's when you first open here and there's no connection strings, or this one doesn't exist, there's a little blue line here. You click on that, it'll do it for you automatically. Pretty handy. Pretty handy.
So now the lines are blowing up, all kinds of questions.
Oh, good, good.
Hey, once they've said no one's asking, I'll ask. Yeah, this is great. Fantastic. All right, so let's start with this one. Can you show how you would filter and run a report on the same button?
Very good question. I love it. Okay, so let me go back to my checkbox filter. I'm going to save that. So as you can see right now, I have 2 buttons that perform the filter and run report. Well, let's go ahead and build another one that says filter and run and just demonstrate how you would do that. So I'm going to go add action button. I'll call that filter and run report. And I'm just going to use that as a button. And I'll click OK. Now I'm going to go in here to my action JavaScript, and let's go ahead and start with the second one. And I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to say open or mail a report, select, and then I'm going to do my checkbox filter report, and I'm going to use my current grid filter. And I want it to display as HTML, and I'm going to go ahead and just show that in a window. Great. Now, I want to add a second action. So I'm going to go ahead here and click Add New Action. And in this case, you'll notice the second thing over here is Ajax callbacks and JavaScript. So what I can do is, instead of going to text mode here, I can actually add another action JavaScript. And this opens up here, and I can insert the method. Checked rows, get rid of that. So this allows you to kind of intermix your own kind of hand customize JavaScript with there. And I'll go run filter so we can see what it is. And then I'm going to move this up here. Now, there's a challenge here, and we'll see how this works in a few moments. JavaScript is asynchronous, meaning it doesn't necessarily, if you launch this, it's going to run everything at the same time. But there's a button in here called Run Actions Synchronously. And to be perfectly honest, this usually works, but sometimes it doesn't work as great. So there may be a second way we can do it, and I can show you that in a few moments here. But anyway, that said, run actions synchronously, and I'm putting them in order of doing the filter and then opening the letter layout from there. So now I've got my filter and run report. Those are my 2 steps, so I've combined them together. I need to show that, so I'm going to go in here and just go filter and run and put in my filter and run report button. click OK, and now I've done both. So now let's give it a try. Again, no guarantees, but we'll notice in a few moments. So you notice we have, let's go ahead and just grab a few things here. Okay, so I'm going to call filter and run report. Okay, so we have the problem. It's called a race condition. And again, the issue we're having right now is that it's filtering it, but the filter isn't done by the time the report is not done. So I'm going to change it. And I'm going to do it a little differently. That way it kind of runs a little bit, and we'll see how this works from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my buttons here, and there are a couple different ways to handle this. One is we could put like a little delay in here, but that's a little crude. I'm going to try a little different direction. What I'm going to actually do is this open our email report. I'm going to get rid of that. And what I'm going to do is the following, is I'm going to go ahead and go over here to JavaScript actions, and I'm going to add that function in here. So filter report. And then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do my report function and select it. Current. Okay. So now I've got my action. I'm going to click here to JavaScript code to invoke that action. So I'm going to grab that. So it's going to copy that. So basically this is, if you put this JavaScript anywhere, hit it, it's going to run that report there. So now I'm going to go back to my buttons, go into my action button. We'll go into here. And I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of this and just go to pure text mode. So I've got my filter checked rows, and then I'm going to run. So it's kind of the equivalent. I kind of created that extra. Now, I think I'm still going to have the race conditions. So here's the little trick. And again, normally you don't have to worry about it. Normally that, do things synchronously works pretty good. But sometimes like the filter could take long. There may be a delay while it calls back to the database, and that is uncontrollable. You don't really know how to do it. Newer JavaScript actually has now something called a promise, which means after I do this, when I'm done, I'm going to send you a message and then you can do another function. That's a lot more advanced, but it's a key feature of the newer version of JavaScript, and you can use those techniques. But there's a real quick trick. I know this is going to take for a certain amount of time to do it, so I can guess, it's usually going to take a half a second or so. So what you can do is go JavaScript pause for 2 seconds. Let's just see that. So I'm going to take some JavaScript here, and I'm just grabbing some code off, finding it on the internet there. That's too, I got to find, but I'm going to wrap one of those things with a little minor delay. Let's see if this, so there. Okay, here we go. Oh, I wonder if that'll work. Just wait 4,000. Let's see what happens there. I'm going to try that. I don't know if that will work. Oh, I think that might be a command they've created. Let me see if they have a command there. Let's see. Yeah, they have a function here called wait. So let's go ahead and copy that in. And let's go ahead and we'll create that function right here. So now, and then I can just say, wait 1 milliseconds. I think let's try 500 milliseconds. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to work. This is using this command, but you could also use another technique that basically wraps this and pause it. But let's see what happens. Let's see if it actually works. It's going to refresh. Did it run? There we go. There. Nope, didn't do it there. So I'm going to have to play with that a little bit. I apologize. I don't have a really super simple answer on it. But what we need to do is basically just, this one didn't work too well. So there's actually, I think it's called set timeout. Let me look real quick. I don't want to spend a lot more time on this. So let me see here. JavaScript timeout. I think it's this one. There we go. That's it right there. Okay. So this is called the set timeout function, and I think that's the one we want. So I'm going to say in 500 milliseconds, then I'm going to grab this and run that. Okay, so what happens is it runs the filter and then it wraps in this set timeout filter. This is a standard way to say, wait this amount of milliseconds before running this command inside here. So if I haven't screwed it up, we'll see if that works. I might actually have to wait for the filter to be a little longer. We'll see in a moment. Yeah, something's going on. I think it's still, yeah, I'm gonna have to come up with a different way to do that. So let me work on that and get back to you. Again, that's the challenge of JavaScript is how do you do timeouts, or how do you do, because it is asynchronous in behavior from there. But the benefit is you can create a single button that runs both items between the two. The trick is you just have to wait for it to settle down for the filter to finish there. Usually what happens is a lot of time you'll have a function you can call after it completes. That's kind of the more modern way that all that is moving. Great question. We'll get the answer.
I'm chatting with Sarah here, who's in charge of our documentation, sort of on a back channel.
Excellent.
And she said, wait a minute, I think she doesn't know the answer right now. So next time we'll come back, but there might be an even slicker way of doing it, which doesn't involve a timeout, which the beauty of that is because the timeout is always, you always have to wait that amount of time. If it's half a second, That's probably no big deal. But if you knew that the maximum amount of time was like 15 seconds, you'd have to wait 15 seconds. So, so it does come back when it does the Ajax callback, and we'll find where it is and give a better example. It's a great question though, and it's a really good one.
So, yes, and we appreciate it. And what we'll do is when that is, we're going to update this function or this. So we're going to post this as is, but we'll probably do a rev of it once we have the answer on that for people who want to wait and get that information there. But excellent question. We appreciate it. Stump the seal.
Very good.
No sardine for you, Dion.
Here's a question. I remember this from desktop, but I don't remember it from web and mobile applications. But the question is it possible to ask the user input at runtime and put their input onto a report, like for example their signature or maybe a timestamp or something like that? Even even if the source table doesn't have that as a field in it.
Yep. Okay. So let me kind of touch on how you would do that. First, the way I would probably use, and I'm not a fan of it, but session variables, which I think in this situation is pretty safe from there. One of the cool things about a report, and here's our report here. Report, let's see, do we have calculated fields? Yeah, we have calculated fields here. So I'm going to create a calculated field, and I'm going to say display underscore name is equal to session dot, I think it's session get session variables. No, I think it's session dot, and then I can put what I want there is display underscore name. So the idea is when this report runs, what it can do is you can set a session variable. When the report runs, it looks and says, oh, here's my session, and then I can use display name. Now that is available inside my report. Now this is a quick report, but in the other ones, maybe you want to put that in the header or something like that. That field will be populated. But that's through what's called a calculated field. And in fact, let me see if I can find, hold on one second, everybody. Okay, if I go to report, this is a free form. I'm gonna report calculated fields. And in here, I'm clicking where it says tips here. And this gives you tips for how to get things into the report. So it allows you to get things like how to get the argument values and other things there. But I definitely know you can pass in session variables and refer to session variables in your reports. But you got to be a little careful on that from that standpoint there. So then the way you would do it is then when in your either grid or UX, you would have maybe, and this would probably be more appropriate on a UX, you would have a field, and then when you click on that, store that field into a session variable, and then run the report, and it will pick up that information there. But you can definitely use session variables within the calculated fields area. Let's see, I thought it talked about that here. No, this talks about ink and things like that. but you can get the arguments and things like that. So that's how I would approach it there, is that I would create calculated fields that look at session variables, and then those session variables can then be displayed on the report, say as a header or pieces there.
Great, thank you. Here's another question, and that is, can you like create a form which has got multiple filters that have been maybe pre-saved in a dropdown, like show me last month's sales figures, or show me today's value, or show me A through M, or show me, for a particular city, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you can do is, and how I would probably, and depends on how that report works, but you can create a UX component. And to show our handy dandy, go to controls, let's go to menu. I'm going to use my demo panel layout. So it's already set and ready to go. So I can actually go in here and I'm going to go ahead and add my report. So this, I'm not going to launch it. I'm going to actually, where is it? It's embedded object. I'm going to try this real quick here. So I'll go ahead and put in a report. And I'm going to go ahead and put in my, okay. So the cool thing is now what this will do is on the left, it'll show the, it'll have a blank area, and then in a moment when it's going to actually run that report on the right. Oh, it's only, let's see, let's go ahead and we'll set it as HTML. There we go. So it gives you all the same options you have launching it, but I'm actually going to show it in here. See, there's your report right here. So now over on the left-hand side, we could either have a grid and then run that report, or we could just add buttons. And for instance, let me just go ahead and add a button here. And I'll go ahead and say report 1, or let's call it filter 1. And then we'll create another button here called filter 2. Go in here, we just go to add action and report, and we can open that report. I'll add the report we want to add it there. Okay, now I can put my filter. So maybe I'll go city is equal to London. So I put in my filter there, click OK. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and open it into my panel, and I'm going to open into panel card 2. So, and then let's go ahead and actually, you know what? Save time. Go ahead and copy that, paste it, go in here, and we'll change that to equals Berlin. And we'll call this, let's call it UX multiple So if anybody wants, we'll have it there. Okay, so go into my working preview. It's going to show the report up front. I don't have to do that, but now I'm going to click there. Oh, interesting. Okay, interesting. It showed it, but it popped it up. Notice that I have my London. These are all London addresses. So now, actually, let's try live preview. Maybe it'll work better in live preview. Give that a try. Sometimes working preview just gets a little confused on things. So bear with me while it starts up and generates my page. Okay, so that's our standard one. Now we can do here. Okay, interesting. Yeah, it's something up with that. I'd have to double check that, but that, not liking loading it into that report area there. But that's how you would do it, is then you would just run those reports as pop-ups. I guess I got a little too fancy. I should have just done the, just showed it there. I was thinking showing different ways to do this stuff, so. And so, but that's how you would do it, is you could just use that SQL query. And guess what? That's just SQL text, like company equals this, customer each of this. So you could save those queries and then pass those in as the filter for that report. And so you have one basic report, and then you use just out of the box standard, stuff on there. So let's go ahead and just try this working preview again. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's just get around the other. Let's go ahead and open it up in a window. So it'll still show that initial report, but then let's see if it does properly pass in there. So we'll go filter. Okay, there's my filter report with these are coming from London. And now let's try that. And yep, there we go. This one is in, you'll have to trust me, but Ober Street 571 is in Berlin. So I'm using pre-made buttons here, but hey, you know what? This could be a list control. That list control could have name and then the SQL statement you want to run. When you click on the row on the list, you could pass that SQL statement in and say, run this report. Because, and this is very important, is let's go ahead and let's just show you how that would work. Let's go ahead and say SQL command. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to make the default value to be New York. Okay. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to duplicate this control. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to call that dynamic filter. Actually, I'm going to do the whole thing. So I'm going to say city equals New York. By the way, I'd probably use the advanced grid filter and do that, but you know, like we showed last week. But okay, so New York here. Ooh, that's SQL can. That didn't cake. Let me make sure this is default value. City equals New York. Oh, I wonder if it doesn't like that. Okay, I think it doesn't like that. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go to my dynamic filter and I'm going to open up that filter. I'm going to go here and instead of hard coding this, I'm going to put in, I believe I can put in, I notice it says insert field from current component. That's how I'll do it. Okay, so yeah, I'll build it. I'll insert the field, which is SQL command. So what's going to happen is it's going to read whatever's in that field, pass it into my filter command. And by the way, I could have pre-built that, and then these would have been separate fields, like if I wanted to do a name, a lot of cool stuff there. So let's go ahead and say, okay. So let's go ahead and do a run. The reason my thing isn't showing correctly, but let me go ahead and just do that. I'll go city equals New York. Let's do the dynamic filter. Oh, interesting. Let's try London. There we go. London, Berlin. Let's run that dynamic filter. Pretty cool. So instead of me hard coding this could be a list control, and the list control could have a filter name and then have the SQL command after it. And when I click dynamic filter, it would say, okay, give me the SQL from the current row selected, pass that into my report generation, and you essentially have it in, you know, essentially universal filtering capability. I mean, it's just the sky's the limit on there. And if this was more hard coded, again, like let me go ahead and just show you that real quick. Let's say I always knew I was going to go off city. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say city is equal to, and I'm putting the single quotes here. So what I'm going to do is say, look at the field here, in this case, SQL command, and put that inside there. So now when this runs, and go here, and I'm just going to type in Berlin. I'm going to dynamic filter, and there you go. Basically, it built up that SQL command, taking the value of here and dynamically inserting it into the SQL command to bring up the relationship from there. So sky's the limit. That's really powerful, that ability to dynamically set up SQL. Again, you could set up the reports with arguments and pass these in as arguments, but an equal, you know, and that's probably a little safer because arguments are like, you know, you prevent spoofing attacks and stuff like that. But if you want to do something a lot more dynamic, you can just save the SQL commands to filter it the way you want and be able to generate that report at any time using that capability there.
Very good. Taking a look here through questions. Not getting a lot here. Someone pointed out, though, that you do have access to variables, and presumably session variables, just when you're creating a calculated field right in the report, which is one way of getting that data
Yeah, you could set session
added in.
variables and say run report, and it will pick them up and do
Yep.
those things.
Wonderful. I'm still looking for questions.
Many ways to skin the cat.
Someone pointed out, this is sort of an interesting behavior. Maybe we can duplicate this,
Sure.
that when you use that checkbox filter and you click the button, it seems to clear the checkboxes off in the next screen. If you notice that or come across that, that might be a...
Oh, okay. The issue, yeah. Okay, so I think that's a setting on here. Okay, so select column. Oh, and then if you expand this, okay. This is important. So you notice we had, when we enabled it, this, like if I disable this, you'll see that it's a single row when you enable it. Now, you'll notice in here that we have two modes, one called single page or multiple page. If you click that checkbox or that top level, if it's single page, it will only select the rows that are currently shown. If you click multiple pages, it will essentially behind the scenes check all the rows on everything that's inside that grid. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting behavioral thing. So if you want them to be able to say select everything in that grid, then including what's on every page, then select multiple pages, and thus it will do that. If you say single page, it will only address, when you click that little checkbox, it will only select the things on the current page.
So here's a related question then. When you have got a multi-page presentation, like in a grid, for example, and you highlight some things or check some things on the first page, when you go to the second, third, fourth page and check things there, is that all part of the same data set? Does it remember from page to page that you would check stuff on page
If you
one?
select multi-pages. So if we go to working preview.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and show you this demonstration here. So I'm going to select these two. I'm going to go to the second page, select these two, and go back to the first page. You'll see they're selected.
There they are. Yeah, okay, great.
But most important, make sure that you've selected multi-pages, because then it puts behind the logic to track things across multiple pages.
Gotcha.
Great question. We love it.
They are. Wow, we've got a bunch of follow-ups too, because we've in a couple places, which is great.
Open a can of worms.
Taking notes. I know it's great.
We opened a can of sardines.
Wonderful. Let's see. Are there any other questions here? I don't see any. Let me just look through one last time through this list. Someone had asked about the Alpha Anywhere roadmap. We don't have one. We do have one. We don't have one currently published, but we are going to create one quite soon. I think the one that we had before in the slide deck ended around end of 2019, 2020. So yeah, we do in fact have one, and we will be presenting it at the DevCon. That might be the first time that we present that publicly. So that would be out in about 6 weeks. But you know, if you've got questions about things that we are working on, or if there's a feature that you think is missing, and or we said is coming, and you're wondering how soon, you can always send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com, and we're happy to consult our schedule and our development team and see where those things are at. Let's see what else we've got here. So we went through the running a report and filtering at the same time, but we need to come back to you on that.
Yep. And
let's see what else we've got. Does it persist across multiple pages? The answer is yes. A drop down for printing predefined things. I believe we've covered that. All right. I guess that is it. If there's something we did not cover, by all means, send an email to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. Dion, thanks very much for presenting today.
My pleasure. Great job.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks to all of you who asked questions and helped keep the conversation lively, give us material to work on. And thank you, Sarah, for helping out here behind the scenes and answering questions. I hope to see you next week at the next Wednesday webinar. Until then, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.